What would you do if you discovered that you were no longer alone, not just in the universe, but in your very own home? I, Bennett Hargrove, often find myself pondering this question, especially since our colony, Nova Aurelia, left Earth 3 centuries ago. The stars felt so far away back then, yet now they seem to haunt me, whispering secrets that chill my blood. It was supposed to be a new beginning, a fresh start on this barren rock we named home, but something followed us, something that lurks in the shadows of our daily lives, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. I still remember the day. We landed on Nova Aurelia, the promise of a new world stretching before us, a blank slate filled with dreams of prosperity. My father, a visionary among our people, had led us here, believing in a future unbound by the chains of our past. I was just a boy then, clutching his hand as we stepped onto the alien soil of a world that felt both strange and familiar. Even now, the memory of his excitement clashes with the growing dread that gnaws at my insides, a fear that has become inseparable from my existence. The colony, with its metal spires rising against a backdrop of swirling cosmic dust, was a marvel of engineering. We carved out a life in the sprawling districts of Helios Square and the bustling market of Astra Promenade. But beneath the surface of our thriving society, whispers began to echo. I could hear them in the rustling leaves of the bioluminescent trees that lined the streets, in the flickering lights of our homes, and in the silence that fell like a shroud when the twin moons would rise high in the sky. It all began with a series of inexplicable events, disappearances, strange sightings, and an oppressive feeling that settled over Nova Aurelia like a thick fog. My friends, once so eager to explore the mysteries of our new home, were now consumed by fear. The local authorities dismissed our concerns, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us. I often found myself wandering the abandoned sectors of our colony, searching for answers in the decaying buildings where echoes of laughter from our past seemed to linger, suffocating in the air. Then there was the night the lights went out. All of them, every flickering screen, every glowing street lamp, suddenly extinguished, plunging us into an abyss. Panic rippled through the colony, but it was the silence that unnerved me most. In that profound darkness, I heard a sound that sent chills down my spine, a low reverberating hum that seemed to resonate from the very core of the planet. It was as if Nova Aurelia itself was alive, and whatever lay beneath its surface was stirring. I didn't know then how deeply entwined my fate was with whatever had followed us from Earth, but I felt it in my bones. As I stood on the edge of these Helios cliffs, the wind howling like a mourning wraith, I could sense that the answers I sought were not merely hidden in the shadows, they were waiting for me to uncover them. But when night fell, something inexplicable happened. It was a night that would shatter everything I thought I knew, drawing me into a mystery that would change the very fabric of our existence on this alien world. As I stood there on the Helios cliffs, the darkness enveloping me like a suffocating blanket, I felt a surge of adrenaline course through my veins. I had always been a curious soul, and the urge to uncover the truth behind the whispers that haunted our colony propelled me forward. But this wasn't just curiosity, it was desperation. I needed to know what had been lurking in the shadows, what had turned my friends into trembling husks of their former selves. The next day, I sought out Celia, my childhood friend, and one of the few who still shared my need for answers. She had become a ghost of her former self, her bright laughter now replaced by a hollow expression that seemed to reflect the unease of our community. We met in the remnants of the old observatory, a place where we once dreamed of the stars together. The walls were draped in darkness, but the bioluminescent vines clung to the cracked surfaces, casting an eerie glow. "Bennett," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Do you really think we're being watched? That something is hunting us?" I nodded, the weight of my conviction pressing down on me. "I can feel it, Celia. It's as if the very air is charged with something, alive, And the disappearances, they're not random. There's a pattern. Just as I spoke, a tremor shook the ground beneath us, causing fragments of the ceiling to rain down. We stumbled back, hearts racing, and exchanged a terrified glance. I could see the flicker of fear in her eyes, but there was something else too, a spark of determination. We need to gather more people. There are others who feel it too, Celia suggested, her voice gaining strength. We can't hide from this anymore. The plan was risky, but we needed allies. That evening, we called a clandestine meeting at the edge of Astra Promenade, a place where the shadows danced under flickering lights. As the sun set, we watched our fellow colonists trickle in, their faces etched with uncertainty, but also a shared resolve. Among them was Marcus, a former engineer whose expertise in the colony's technology could prove invaluable. He had always been skeptical of the supernatural, grounded in logic, but that skepticism was beginning to erode. We can't just sit around and wait for something to happen, I urged the group, my voice steady and firm. We need to venture into the sectors where the disappearances occurred. We need to confront whatever is out there. Marcus nodded, but I could see the conflict in his eyes. And if we find nothing, what then? What if it's all in our heads? Then, we'll at least know, I replied, feeling the tension in the air. But if we do nothing, we give whatever it is power over us. The group fell silent, each person grappling with their own fears and doubts. Suddenly, a voice cut through the tension. Leela, a sharp-witted botanist who had always been a voice of reason. We can't ignore the signs. The flora has been behaving strangely, and I've recorded anomalies in the growth patterns. It's almost as if they're responding to something. Exactly, I said, eager to build on her insight. If the environment is changing, then something is definitely happening beneath the surface. The emotional weight of our shared fears hung heavily in the air, but I could see the resolve building among us. We were bonded by our shared dread, but now we were also united by a common purpose. As the meeting concluded, we agreed to investigate the abandoned sectors the following night. But as I returned to my quarters, the oppressive weight of dread settled back in. I could feel the eyes of the unseen watching me, and I knew that whatever we were about to uncover, it would alter the course of our lives forever. With my heart racing, I prepared for the night ahead, knowing that the darkness would not simply yield its secrets willingly. The first step into the unknown loomed, and I was ready to confront whatever had followed us from Earth. As I lay in bed, the shadows creeping through my window seemed to twist and morph into sinister shapes. I stared at the ceiling, replaying the meeting in my mind. The faces of my friends, once filled with hope and laughter, now haunted me. I could almost hear their whispers echoing my own fears. What if we were deluding ourselves? What if the darkness we sensed was merely a figment of our collective paranoia? Just as I began to drift into an uneasy sleep, a sudden noise jolted me awake, a soft scratching at my door. My heart raced as I glanced at the clock. It was well past midnight. I hesitated, the rational part of my mind urging me to ignore it, but the curiosity that had driven me to the cliffs surged back. I swung my legs over the edge of the bed, the cold floor sending chills up my spine. I opened the door, and there stood Marcus, his face pale and drawn. "Bennett, we need to talk," he said, his voice shaking slightly. I nodded, stepping aside to let him in. "What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." He paced the small room, wringing his hands. I went back to the observatory to check something, and I found this. He pulled out a small, tattered journal, its pages yellowed with age. It belonged to Dr. Harris, the colony's founder. I thought it was just a relic, but then I read it. He documented strange occurrences, things that happened before we arrived. I felt my pulse quicken. Like what? "Disappearances, yes, but also notes about experiments he conducted," Marcus replied, his voice lowering conspiratorially. He believed something was lurking in the shadows, something that fed on fear. But there's more. He mentioned a connection to the flora, how it seemed to react to the presence of these entities. I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. You think it's connected to what's happening now? Yes, but there's more, he said, his eyes darting around the room as if he feared being overheard. I found references to something called the veil. It's a barrier that separates our reality from another. Dr. Harris thought that it was weakening, allowing something to seep through. My mind raced, the implications of his words crashing over me like waves. But what does that mean for us? Are we in danger? Maybe, he whispered. But what really scares me is how much he wrote about fear. Being a catalyst. The more we fear, the stronger it becomes. Suddenly the room felt stifling. The shadows seemed to stretch, closing in around us. A memory flickered in my mind. My little sister, Mia, who had vanished during a storm years ago back on Earth. I had never accepted her loss, always believing that I could find her. What if this darkness had something to do with her disappearance? I can't shake the feeling that this connects to my past, I admitted, my voice trembling. Mia, she was taken, and I couldn't save her. What if this is all connected? Marcus met my gaze, his expression shifting from fear to something more profound, understanding. We all have our ghosts, Bennett. We have to confront them if we're going to face whatever is out there. Just then, a loud crash echoed from the corridor outside, pulling us from our thoughts. We exchanged a glance, both of us knowing we couldn't ignore it any longer. Whatever was hunting us was growing bolder, and the time for answers was running out. With a shared nod, we stepped into the darkness, ready to confront the unknown, but the questions that lingered, about the veil, about my sister, about our sanity, threatened to unravel everything I thought I knew. As we stepped into the hallway, the air crackled with tension, thick and suffocating. Marcus and I moved cautiously, our senses heightened, every creak of the floorboard sending jolts of adrenaline through my veins. The crash had come from the common room, a place once filled with laughter and camaraderie. Now it felt like a tomb, a harbinger of something sinister, lurking just beyond our sight. Stay close, I whispered, gripping the edge of the doorframe as we approached the common room. The shadows danced along the walls, and for a moment, I could almost hear the echoes of our laughter, now twisted into taunts. My heart pounded in my chest, drowning out the world around me. As we reached the entrance, I peered inside. The room was in disarray, furniture overturned, papers scattered like autumn leaves, and in the center of it all stood Sarah, her back to us. She was trembling, her hands clutching something tightly. "Sarah," I called out, my voice breaking the oppressive silence. She turned slowly, her face pale and eyes wild, and in that moment I saw the fear reflected back at me. But there was something else, something dark lurking beneath the surface of her gaze. "Bennett, Marcus," she stammered, I was just trying to..." She held up what she gripped, and I felt my blood run cold. It was a piece of the same. Flora Dr. Harris had written about, its vibrant colors almost hypnotic. It spoke to me. It told me... "Spoke?" Marcus interjected, stepping forward. "What do you mean it spoke?" "It said, the veil is thinning. It feeds on our fear, our despair. I thought I could understand it." Her voice cracked, a mix of desperation and revelation. I glanced at Marcus, a million questions swirling in my mind. Was she truly lost to the darkness, or was there something more? "Sarah, we can't let it manipulate us. We need to stay strong." Suddenly, the shadows shifted, coalescing into a shape that made my stomach drop. A figure emerged, its eyes glowing like embers, radiating a palpable dread. I recognized it, a manifestation of everything I had lost, every failure and regret. It lunged forward, and I felt an icy tendril wrap around my throat, squeezing tighter. "Bennett!" Marcus shouted, reaching for me. "Fight it! Remember who you are!" I struggled, my breath coming in gasps. The darkness whispered to me, pulling me deeper into despair, urging me to succumb. But amidst the chaos, memories of Mia flickered in my mind, her laughter, her smile. I couldn't let this darkness take me too. "Get away from him!" Sarah screamed, wielding the flora like a weapon. The moment she thrust it forward, a flash of light erupted, illuminating the room and momentarily banishing the darkness. The figure recoiled, hissing in fury. "Bennett, we have to act now," Marcus urged, his voice cutting through the haze. "We have to confront it together." I felt a surge of determination. "We're not afraid of you," I shouted, stepping forward with Marcus and Sarah flanking me. The shadows writhed around us, but we held our ground. This was our moment. The truth of our fears, our pain, and our unity could either bind us or break us. With a deep breath, I reached out, linking my hand with theirs. "We will not be your prey." The entity howled, and the room trembled as we faced the darkness together, the outcome of this confrontation hanging precariously in the balance. As our hands linked together, the pulse of our unity surged through me, igniting a fire against the suffocating darkness. The entity writhed, its form twisting and contorting as if it were trying to escape the light we summoned. I could feel the weight of my past pressing in, but I refused to let it crush me. I focused on the warmth of Marcus and Sarah beside me, the strength of our bond radiating outward. "Now!" I shouted, and we pushed forward. The light intensified, forcing the shadows back, revealing glimpses of the horror lurking within. Faces I recognized, lost friends and family, flashed before my eyes, reminding me of the stakes. But I stood firm, chanting the mantra in my mind, "We are not afraid." The entity shrieked, a sound that tore through the air like a blade. The walls vibrated, and I felt the ground shift beneath us. The light enveloped us, a blinding brilliance that felt both liberating and terrifying. I closed my eyes against the glare, but I could still feel the presence of the entity dissipating, its hate and despair unraveling like a fraying rope. Then, silence. The oppressive weight lifted, and the room slowly returned to its familiar state, though the remnants of chaos lingered like ghosts. I opened my eyes, taking in the sight of the common room. It was still a mess, but the shadows had receded, leaving a dull echo of what had transpired. Did we do it?" Sarah breathed, her voice shaky. She looked at the flora in her hand, now wilted and lifeless. "Is it over?" "I think so," Marcus replied, though his face was drawn tight, eyes scanning the room as if expecting another's attack. "But at what cost?" I felt the exhaustion settle in my bones as I turned to my friends. "We're alive, that's what matters." But the words felt hollow, a fragile shield against the truth. I could still feel the icy grip of the entity lingering, a reminder of my vulnerabilities. Sarah sank to the floor, tears streaming down her cheeks. I thought I could understand it. I thought I could control it. Her voice was a whisper, a confession of her own despair. The truth hit me hard. She had been drawn into the darkness, perhaps more than I realized. "We all have our struggles," I said gently, kneeling beside her. "But we need to talk about this. We can't let it define us." As we supported each other, I caught a glimpse of the window. Outside, the sky was a swirling mass of colors, vibrant and unsettling. It felt like a warning, a hint that the battle we'd just fought was only the beginning. "Look," I said, pointing. "What is that?" Marcus squinted, his brow furrowed. "It's like the horizon is shifting?" The air buzzed with an unsettling energy, pulling at the edges of my consciousness. I could sense it. Something still lurked beyond our understanding, waiting for the right moment to strike again. "I think we've only scratched the surface," I murmured, dread pooling in my stomach. "There's more to this. We need to prepare for whatever comes next." As the sun dipped below the horizon, I realized this was a turning point. We were alive, yes, but the scars of our encounter ran deep, etched into our very souls. The shadows may have retreated for now, but they would return. And I feared that next time we might not be so lucky. Together we began to clean the common room, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this was merely the calm before the storm. What was the veil, really? And what would it take to truly defeat it? The answers lay hidden, waiting for us to uncover them in the darkness that still loomed ahead. As we continued to clean the common room, a heavy silence enveloped us, punctuated only by the rustle of debris and the distant hum of the world outside. The fading light painted everything in shades of twilight, reminding me of the battle we had just endured. Yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still lurking, waiting for its moment to return. "Do you think it's really over?" I asked, trying to pierce the heavy atmosphere with a thread of hope. Marcus paused, his hands trembling slightly as he collected a broken chair. "I want to believe that," he said, glancing toward the window. "But the horizon, it feels like it's calling to us, doesn't it?" I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest. The sky outside twisted and turned, colors merging in a dance of beauty and terror. It was mesmerizing, yet foreboding, a reminder that our encounter with the darkness was not merely a fight, but a prelude to something larger. Sarah stood up, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "We have to be ready. If it comes back, we can't let it take us again." But even as I spoke the words, doubt crept in. What if I wasn't strong enough? What if none of us were? Just then, a shiver ran down my spine. I turned back to the window, and for a fleeting moment, I saw a figure, shrouded in shadow, its eyes glinting with an unnatural light. It was gone before I could blink, leaving behind only the echo of its existence, a reminder of what we had fought against and what we might face again. The air thickened with uncertainty, and I realized that despite our victory, we had merely scratched the surface of the Veil's true nature. It was a cycle, one that could begin anew at any moment, and I felt the weight of that knowledge settle heavily on my shoulders. "Together," I whispered, the promise hanging in the air like a fragile thread. But as the darkness outside writhed, I couldn't help but wonder, would that be enough? As I looked at Marcus and Sarah, their faces illuminated. By the fading light, I felt a mix of dread and resolve. We had survived, but the true test lay ahead, and the line between light and shadow was more blurred than ever. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. Share with your friends, so they can also embark on this mystery-filled adventure. Leave a comment below telling us your favorite part or what kind of ending you'd like to see in a future story.